Good morning and welcome once again to the Calam Cymru revision sessions. So the AS session that we've got today is the second session in Unit 1. So that's Section B, where we're looking at drama with that as a focus. So just a little reminder before we continue. The sessions for the Spring 2024 series here, they are Session 1, the Unit 1 Drama and Prose, so where we were looking at Section A. Session 2 is the Unit 1 Drama and Prose, looking at Section B, so that's the drama part. Session 3, looking at Section A, the poetry on Unit 2, and then Session 4 would be the Section B of the poetry. Okay, so just a little reminder of how to access these. So you'd have to go to the e-sgol website, go to the Calam Cymru drop-down menu, down as far as recordings, and then obviously you'd click on the AS recordings there. So the Unit 1 Section B paper, okay, so we're going to go through a little bit of terminology, we're going to go through some approaches to the exam, and also a quick reminder as to what's expected, and essentially the expectations of the examiner when they are marking, okay? So just an overview then that you're probably quite familiar with for the paper. So we know this is Section B, and so this is the essay. So strict timing for Section A is really important to ensure that you don't run out of time for Section B, and to ensure that you don't end up producing underdeveloped responses. So what they're expecting to see is that you actually spend that 60 minutes on there. Okay, so 60 marks in 60 minutes. So differently to the first section, so Section A with the prose, there you've got 20 marks for part 1 of Section A, then 40 for part 2. Here it's a task, one essay, and there's that expectation that you write a really developed, a detailed and effectively planned response, okay? So you need to ensure that you focus on the text as a drama, which means that you need to ensure that there is this close exploration of dramatic technique, which is going to be vital for your assessment or in your assessment at AO2. There is a kind of comment here which has come from WJEC stating that biographical detail is acceptable for AO3. However, it needs to be a little bit more purposeful rather than just kind of throwaway narrative type comments that are unconnected to the text and unconnected to the task. So successful responses like those in Section A follow the task, text, context sort of formula. So it means that it's a sort of task and literary driven essay, and that you're not kind of blindsided by bringing in the context and bringing in the critical readings, okay? That it remains a literary focus, and that language analysis and the use of language and the ability to answer the question remains sort of at the forefront with regards to your individual focus. So differently again to Section A, the allocation of marks are quite different, and it's really important that you are aware and that you appreciate how many marks are allocated to which assessment objective, because it varies from section to section. So if you're in your head thinking of Section A, the essay, for example, the prose essay, there's only 5 marks awarded for AO1 and 5 marks awarded for AO2 there. Okay, this is 15-15. So we need to make sure that you're kind of tuning into each question. And again, that you're mindful of the expectations for that particular section, so that you're ensuring that you actually approach it with the right kind of mark scheme in your focus. So in your response, you are required to analyse how meanings are shaped, demonstrate understanding of the significance and influence of the context in which literary texts are written and received, and show how different interpretations have informed your reading of the play. All right. So again, here's an example of the types of questions you've got, and what you'll see here differently again to Section A is that you have got an option, you've got a choice. Okay. So you've got, so for example, the 2 most common texts that are studied are Faustus by Christopher Marlowe and Tennessee Williams's A Streetcar Named Desire. So notice how you can choose whichever one you're most familiar with, okay? So you've got either or here, so you choose one of the two, differently to section A, the essay question, where you are given a question and you're expected just to answer that. There's no options, okay? You can't choose something else. So as noted for section A, if we're looking at A01 here, it's important that candidates pay close attention to timing. Indeed, it's advised that candidates spend 60 minutes on section B. Keeping to strict timings is therefore essential in section A in order to prevent candidates from running out of time and producing developed responses. It's important that candidates remain focused on the question and don't wander into writing a different essay to the one that's been set. There were some candidates on occasion did seem to kind of merge both options. So it's some examiners weren't sure, therefore, which question that they'd chosen to answer. Weaker responses did seem to just list dramatic techniques, and there was very little comment on like the dramatic effect and things like the impact of lighting, props and staging, okay? Many responses for AO2 then demonstrated confident understanding of writer's use of language and dramatic features, quoting confidently from the text. Some responses were impressive, considering it's a closed book examination. It is important, however, the sentence encouraged people to make full use of their knowledge of dramatic devices, such as staging, stage directions, music and props, and frequently refer to the audience, okay? So again, there's a nice little reminder there that you need to always consider yourself not as the reader, but as the audience, somebody who's watching, somebody who's observing the play, all right? AO3 then, some advice is that it's vital that we encourage candidates to draw upon a range of specific contextual material. So the key word here for me is specific, okay? If you've got dates, we need dates. If you've got actual detailed discussion of what happened, names of people quite possibly that are involved, give them to us, okay? This specific contextual material, and to avoid these generalized kind of sweeping statement about who in the Victorian era, okay? We need more detail. So some candidates are able to make thoughtful comments about the context of reception, while others drifted into irrelevant biographical detail. Although some biographical detail is important, it's also vital that candidates allude to the impact of the biographical detail when analysing language or dramatic technique. Okay, once again, just reminding you to use that formula, that approach of task, text, context, okay, with regards to how you rank it, okay? So the task has to be, you know, first and foremost. Then you need to make sure that you're dealing effectively with the text. And then in comes the context and the critical readings, okay, to ensure that the context informs rather than like takes over and engulfs your essay and your response, okay? That's how it needs to be developed. And then when it comes to your AO5, so this is the critical reading. So as with section A, so similar kind of comments being made. It's advised that candidates must use other relevant opinion to inform their own discussion of the text, in order to therefore build a more detailed, thorough personal response. So centres should advise candidates of their number of ways to gain marks for AO5. So you could look at critical views where you've got sort of named critics, okay, so engaging with specific critical views. You could look at critical perspectives, okay, where you've got maybe a Marxist, feminist, historicist critic. And then there obviously is the fact that you can offer multiple readings. So you could look at specific characters, a character could be read differently, a specific event could be perceived differently. There were some cases where candidates did not include any alternative readings or use the tentative vocabulary. Okay, so this is a really good tip here, this tentative vocabulary. If all else fails and you have nothing with regards to named critics, a critical view, and you sort of shut down a little bit and you have a panic, if you ensure that you're writing, this could be, others could suggest, arguably this is, another view would be or could be, then you're ensuring that you're using that tentative language, that tentative vocabulary choices, and that makes sure that you're not ending up with a mark, 0 marks being awarded for that assessment objective, okay? Right, so as I said, we're focusing on section B, which is the drama side of things. So before we do anything else, we need to understand how best to approach a drama text. So in your analysis, you need to consider how meaning is enhanced by the way that the events of the play are organised. You need to have a think about how playwrights add the significance of certain events by the position of those events in the play's narrative, so when they are included. And you also need to be thinking about what characters know and don't know at specific times. Okay? So key aspects that must be considered is that of dramatic structure. Okay, so the way in which it's put together. It could be a case of, is there a specific choice of setting? How is the drama constructed? Is it resolved in the opening and then kind of, is there an issue at the end of the play that's resolved quite possibly? If there's any use of features such as maybe a subplot, as in like a play within the play, how is it divided? Okay, so think about how it's structured. Is it traditional modern drama? Okay, so consider elements like that. And here what you've got then is a kind of list of aspects that you should be able to consider for the vast majority of texts that you're studying. Okay, I will make reference to a couple of individual texts. And obviously, as you saw, I put up the Streetcar and the Faustus questions as they are the most popular. But regardless of what text you may be studying, the skills that we talk about today, the revision sort of tools, devices, and the list, say, for example, here, that's applicable for every text, regardless of which text you are studying. So don't think, oh, she's talking about Streetcar. Oh, I don't need to listen. Everything can be applied to the text that you are studying. Okay. So like I said, some things, key aspects that you could potentially be considering here. So you've got things like your stage directions. Okay. Is there a multitude of stage directions? Is there a lot there? Is there very little? Is the dramatist quite specific in their stage directions? What impact does that have? Okay, and also quote the stage directions as well. Okay, because the way in which stage directions use often give us a lot of information about how a character is behaving, their actions, etc. Okay, lighting, music, sound effects, the set, so as in how the background, quite possibly the backdrop, costume, whether anybody's in some sort of a disguise, quite possibly the use of the idea of status, and that could link to costume, set as well, music, quite possibly. If you are aware of use of dramatic irony, if there's use of like a plot twist where there's an element of suspense or surprise or tension being created. So these are a number of things that you could potentially be considering in order to demonstrate clearly to the examiner that you are appreciating and that you are quite mindful and aware of the dramatic elements of the text that you are studying. All right, so just be conscious of those. So we're just going to go through some elements with regards to creating an effective drama. So one thing we're looking at here is the use of dramatic characterization. So it's important that you consider the range of strategies that playwrights use in a bid to kind of create and in a bid to develop characters. So the types of things that could be considered are how the characters are established, okay, how they are presented. So you can think about their physical appearance, okay, so what they're wearing as well, actions or motives that have been given to them, attributed to them, what they say and think, so, and also how they say things, okay, the way in which they kind of interact with others, and the views of others, what others say and think about them. That's how a character is characterized, okay? You could look at how far the characters conform to or subvert stereotypes. You could also look at the role or the function of minor characters within the play, and also the relationship that's clearly presented between characters. So then you could look at as well and consider the way in which playwrights organise speech and language, so the dramatic speech and language choices. So you'll be hopefully quite familiar with the majority of these terms. So you have got things such as dialogue, so the conversation. You've got use of monologue, so where there's an individual speaking. Soliloquy, often played alone on stage, but always directed to the audience. Asides, again, there's often some of the characters, but it's for that engagement with the audience. If there's functional or literal speech, if the speech choices are poetic, if they're metaphorical, if they're symbolic, think about what the role or function of the character is. Consider whether or not there is some sort of authorial intrusion, possibly in a political kind of state of mind or frame, where the character is used or manipulated in a bid to act as a mouthpiece, like a vocal point for the playwright and his or her views. So types of things that you could potentially be thinking about. And then we've got this idea of setting. Okay, so a setting is where and when a story or scene takes place. It could be a real place, or it could be an imagined location. It could be in a real time period, or it could be, again, in the future, an imagined time period. It could be in the past, quite possibly. And other aspects that determine the setting are things like landscapes, architecture, time of day, the social context, and also you could be considering the aspect of weather as well. So with setting, it's sometimes referred to as the scene, or sometimes a sense of place. And far from just being a backdrop to the story or to the play, the setting of a piece of literature often shapes kind of the story or the plot of the play, and it kind of like moves the main events and motivates the characters to act as they do. Okay, many works of literature do have multiple settings. It could be an interior or exterior of a specific house or location. It could move from country to country. It can also move from time to time, so like century to century, quite possibly. Okay, so it's just important that you're aware of how these plot developments and how character developments kind of linked to the changes in setting. So as I said, it could be linked to the physical location. Okay, so that's like, so it could be geography, it could be landscape. Is it urban or is it rural? Is it domestic, wild? Is it in earth space? That kind of thing. Time-wise, when the story takes place. The social setting, okay, it's not always about physical aspects, okay, it could also be about the social world. You could maybe consider the social status aspect of things here. So is the setting one of affluence and wealth, or is there a sense of poverty? Is it quite a diverse setting that's being presented? Does the playwright, the dramatist, suggest that things are on the up and getting better and improving? Or is there a sense of decline that's being shown? And setting can also reflect a sense of change as well, okay? Can also be affected by how it changes. So it could be a sense of the change in season. It could be a sense of like something being built or created. There could be something significant like linked to weather, like a terrible storm that sort of provides a sense of change, okay? So the changes that do or possibly don't affect a setting are as important as the setting itself. And then, like I said, a quick reference here now to A Streetcar Named Desire. So those of you who have studied or are studying it will know that the whole play is set in an apartment in the French Quarter of the city of New Orleans in the state of Louisiana. New Orleans features most vividly in the opening stage directions, and Tennessee Williams describes the district with some real considerable affection. We learn that it lies between the Mississippi River and the Louisville National Railway tracks, and is rightly mentioned by Stella in scene 1. And it is presented as quite a poor, underprivileged area. Okay. The use of another term that you may be, or hopefully quite familiar with, is this use of dramatic irony. It features quite heavily in plays. But just to clarify, if you're unsure, dramatic irony is a situation in which the reader, or in our case, audience, knows something about present or future circumstances that the character's not aware of. For example, we've got the play Macbeth, Shakespeare's Macbeth, where we see the murdered body of King Duncan being found. And we also see the character of Macbeth, so who is the protagonist of the play. The body of Duncan is found, and Macbeth, at this point, behaves really angry, really frustrated with the supposed murderers, and actually kills Duncan's guards, who they believe, or who he insinuates are the murderers. However, the audience know that he is in fact the murderer. Okay, so he puts on this big show for those on stage with him, trying to obviously deflect and sort of impose a sense of guilt, and in a sense on himself and guilt on others. And that is what we call dramatic irony, how we as an audience, we're kind of in the know. We've got some information on the actors on stage, okay? We're privy to more, aren't we? Okay, so there's your use of dramatic irony. So one of the most effective items in a dramatist toolbox, okay, found really commonly in films, novels, plays, often more so in tragedies and comedies, in order to create suspense, and it is used to enhance the emotional appeal of a story. So when we're thinking about saying, oh, in this play, Faustus uses dramatic irony here in a bid 2, you've got to think about why it is being used. So, you know, we're talking about how it allows us to create this element of suspense, and it enhances our emotional appeal, okay? But it's also just this sense that we have to go that far in our discussion. Authors use the device to create unusual meaning in speeches of the characters, a situation in which the audience knows about causes and conflicts before the main characters do. It's a really useful plot device, okay? Writers use dramatic irony to create and sustain the audience's interest. It also can be used to generate this element of curiosity, okay? It keeps us wanting more. It keeps us as an audience entirely engaged. It also allows for tension, okay, in the audience. And we are encouraged, therefore, to fear the moment when characters learn the truth that we, as an audience, already know. All right? So again, there's that sense of like appreciating and being really mindful of the impact that the choices have on us as an audience. So you've got things then, okay, like stagecraft. Okay, so again, just using that term stagecraft. So that refers to kind of like the technical aspect of theatre. Okay, so things like scene, set design, stage machinery, lighting, sound, costume, makeup. Okay, it refers to the combination of all the elements that actually allow for a performance to kind of come together, and it allows for the on-stage dynamics, such as, you know, creating a mood and kind of scenic movement, and it evokes those feelings in us as an audience. So a really useful and purposeful way. So elements of stagecraft that we've got are things such as lighting, okay? Often theatre lighting kind of focuses on the way that lighting looks to the audience, and there's often a dramatic kind of purpose or relevance to choices that are made. Costume is another aspect we could be considering, okay? And kind of this idea of theatrical costume design. The props that are used, so theatrical property, commonly referred to as props. So that could be things like the hand props and the personal props, okay? And then you've got the sound effects, okay? So sound encompasses the effects audible to the audience during a performance to communicate character, context, and atmosphere. And that is really, really important, vital in setting the mood and immersing us as spectators into their performance. So again, some more key phrases. So you're just talking like key terminology that you should know, okay? And the use of an allusion. So this is a reference to a person or a place or an event, usually without being specific, okay? So we often see them where you've got a playwright possibly basing their plot on kind of legends or historical events, or kind of linking to a historical event, or using maybe a literary allusion or a biblical allusion, so referring to the Bible or religion, or referring to another literary work, or drawing an idea from maybe one of their contemporary sort of works as well, okay? The purpose of it is to establish a sense of like tone, create some sort of an implied association, okay, in an attempt sometimes to contrast two kind of different ideas. Again, just to kind of go over a couple of key things that you're probably going to want to discuss in your own responses. So you've got use of monologue and the use of a soliloquy. So vast majority of plays are strewn with monologues. You've got these long interrupted speeches that are spoken in the presence of other characters. So unlike a soliloquy, a monologue is heard by the other characters. The soliloquy then is a speech in which a character who is normally, not always, but normally alone on the stage, expresses their thoughts aloud. Like I was saying earlier, you've got to be able to explain why the character is using soliloquies. So the convention is that the audience is allowed to hear the character's thoughts. He or she is not talking, but thinking. Shakespeare, for example, uses soliloquies liberally, and some of his finest pieces of writing are in this form. For example, the to be or not to be soliloquy in Hamlet. And the whole purpose of it is it allows the writer to convey the character's most intimate thoughts. And it allows for that connection then, consequently, between us as an audience and the character on stage. So use of symbolism, again, is something you're likely to have come across quite frequently. So a device in which an object, person, or situation is given another meaning beyond its literal one. Universal symbols have meanings across many different works. For example, if you take the idea of a snake, snakes often express this idea of deception, cunning, treachery throughout literature. So contextual symbols, okay, have meaning within the work which they are featured, and others are universal symbols. Symbolism can also be formed in the way of colour as well. So there's just a list of kind of things that link to specific colours. And then we will just have a quick look at this idea of characterization. Okay, so characterization is the process of producing or creating a character through typifying its actions, words, and thoughts. Character development is really important in the text, and each dramatic character is said to have a clear or specific function or need. Okay, a character without a function is therefore not valued. Every character can be analysed in every scene for its function in terms of the play's parts, and the character helps to further the plot, it helps to express ideas, and it helps to contribute to the spectacle that's being played out on stage. Okay, thoughts, words, and the actions of character help in understanding the character in a better way. So here what you've got then is a task which is going to give you something to focus on with regards to that kind of dramatic angle. So considering the terms that I have just gone over with you, some of those lists of key terminology, what you've got here is an essay, a Dr. Faustus essay. And the biggest issue with this is not its use of context, not its use of critical readings, not its ability to answer the question, is that the use of AO2 here falls a little bit short when it comes to the dramatic angle. Okay, so very little awareness or very little discussion of the text as a play. All right, so little audience awareness, that type of thing. So a really nice task here would be for you guys to spend a little bit of time, have a read through, okay, the answer. Okay, the answer's there for you. And just make some bullet point notes about how you could potentially add the dramatic side of things in an effort to improve this. Okay, so it's quite a lengthy response. But as I said, it would definitely allow you to sort of consider something in a different sense, okay? So you've got then coming up a question and then an example answer. So the question is, examine the view that a streetcar named Desire fails because the relationship between Stella and Stanley is inconceivable, as in you don't believe it, you don't trust it possibly. So what you've got coming up is an example essay that follows the different aspects of this question. And what I want you to look at is what's been highlighted initially, okay? So as you can see, I've highlighted certain aspects in this example essay, but what you're going to be asked to do is under the headings or sort of little bullet points for AO1, AO2, AO3, and AO5, make a list of the points in this given essay that you feel hit the assessment objectives, similar to the points that I've highlighted in that first page. Okay, so we have a quick look at this here. So I've started off with, it's arguable that Williams's representation of the very different characters of Stella and Stanley make their relationship unrealistic. So straight away, this is answering the demands of the question. Okay, so ticking the box with regards to AO1. Okay, straight into discussing the question that's been asked of them. Also, you can see that arguable has been highlighted. If you remember when we went through the examiner commentary at the beginning of the session, there were a couple of comments that I made about using tentative language choices, okay? This idea that, you know, it could be viewed differently. So it is arguable that Williams' representation of the two very different characters of Stella and Stanley make the relationship unrealistic. Whereas Stella is an aristocrat from the South, clearly upper class and well-spoken. Stanley is a second-generation Polish immigrant, born and raised in the greatest country on earth, and proud as hell of it, who uses working-class demotic language and is presented as the modern alpha male. So again, looking at the language choices, okay, in order to kind of back up the background of Stanley. It could be argued the opposites attract. Again, it could be that tentative language choice. However, it may be difficult for any audience, contemporary or modern, so considering it as a play, also considering that different audiences may react in a different way to this particular text, to really understand how these two characters not only got married, but ever even crossed paths. Perhaps, again, use of tentative there, their relationship becomes less believable, totally focused on the question, when considering the historical, social and cultural context in which the play was produced and set. So considering the use of context here, which seems to be created the perfect storm for this couple to have met. During the Second World War, the social differences between the pair would likely have been diminished in such a time of upheaval. So linking to the time, okay, so the use of the Second World War, Stella coming to New Orleans for work and Stanley being a respectable soldier seems to blur the boundaries of their social divide. Okay, so detailed commentary. On the other hand, so considering a different viewpoint, other audiences may still challenge ideas that the couple is at all conceivable, as Stanley's reaction to Blanche, whose social status is identical to Stella's, is extremely hostile, as is evident when he mocks his snobbish attitude and pretentious actions. You come in here and sprinkle the place with powder and spray perfume and cover the light bulb with a paper lantern. And lo and behold, the place is turned into Egypt and you are the Queen of the Nile. Okay, so possibly that particular quotation is a little bit long. We would like maybe a little bit more focus on individual words and phrases there, but most definitely using the language choices, using evidence and textual support to back up what is being said. So like I said, have a look at the AO1 that you see, AO2, AO3, AO5, and then look at how it hits the assessment objectives there. Okay, so this is the actual feedback. that the examiner gave this answer. Okay, so you can see how successful a response it is. So the examiner says there was a disciplined answer that serves well the ideas informing it. The conduct of the debate is assured in overall structure, and the use of discussion markers at key points. The question is answered and focus on most of the keywords is sustained. This idea here of the technical accuracy is also mentioned. So AO2 then, assertions are supported with direct or indirect reference to the text or of the play. The words and actions of significant characters are foregrounded, even when contextual matters are under discussion. Quotations of varying length are well chosen and skillfully embedded, and always accompanied by perceptive explanation. There is a secure awareness of the text as a play for the stage, and that's what we need to be focusing on, okay? This idea of it there being a secure awareness of the text as a play for the stage. So that idea of you as an audience rather than a reader. The candidate is fully aware of the play's various contexts and is able to discuss its reception, so how it was received, and impact on audiences, thereby enhancing the argument in no small measure. And then AO5, alternative interpretation, investigate and expound with understanding at a sophisticated level. And there's a sense that there was this ability to provide a really balanced discussion or balanced debate, okay? Right, what I've got then from this point are just key terminology, okay? So we'll just flick through the slides. Something you can go back and use as a sense, as tools to revise from at a later date. Okay, so you've got alliteration, parody, so you can see it's just the term and then an explanation. And at some point you've got sort of an example as well. So metonymy, okay, we've always remained loyal to the crown. So where you've got a figure of speech, which a close related term is substituted for an object or an idea. Okay, so some of these you will be familiar with, for example, stage direction. Others possibly are more unfamiliar. But it's vital that you're able to consider different terminology choices for both AO1 and for your AO2 as well. So have a little look through these. Some of them may not apply to the text, to the drama that you are studying, okay? So these are generalized dramatic terms that you may come across when studying a play. So just be mindful, obviously, if you've read a tragedy, then the comedy possibly wouldn't be relevant to you, okay? But again, just be mindful that it's important to be aware of the correct terminology for your given play, okay? So stage directions is the last one here, okay? But just be conscious, have a good look through these, have a little bit of time to revise through them, but do make use of the tasks that are there. Also be conscious that there's a lot of sort of revision material available to you on the Canon Cymru website from past series, and also you've got some on the WJC website. They're under their blended learning as well. Okay, right. Best of luck to you in the external examination, and I will hopefully speak to you soon. Thank you guys, appreciate your time.